Larry Dane Brimner here. As promised, I'm continuing the writing nonfiction series. In two previous videos, I spoke about getting started in research. The latter of these ended with the line, then organize and write. Well, every person will have their own way of organizing their research materials. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Some of my friends keep their notes, articles, and summaries in 3-ring binders. One writes as she researches, filling in the gaps in her manuscript as she discovers more information, moving back and forth through her text. Another keeps his notes, everything really, in a box and riffles through it all as he writes his first draft. Then another is a piler. That is, her notes are piled neatly on the horizontal surfaces in her office, with each pile being dedicated to a different aspect of her topic. Some use software tools like Scrivener. I've probably used all these techniques at one time or another to organize myself, but the one I most typically use is to collect my information and to highlight the bits that seem important with a highlighter pen. Articles I organize according to date, from those occurring before the subject I'm writing about to those that appeared after. These are then piled on my work table and admittedly sometimes on the floor according to what? Well, according to genre, I guess. Primary source books here, secondary there, newspaper articles in yet another, and so on. Trust me, you'll find the method that works best for you. It may be a combination of those I've described here or something entirely unique to you. If it works, go with it. You've done your research, you have it organized, now what? Well, it's time to write, of course. The journalist, teacher, and writer Peter Jacoby taught me something a long time ago about writing. Whether you're writing history or biography or fiction, don't necessarily begin at the beginning. Instead, begin with something that will, with any luck, make the reader want to find out more. He called it a hook. I call it a dramatic moment. If you're writing a biography, as Peter pointed out, don't begin with the person's birth, as might seem logical. Instead, begin with what makes that person stand out or noteworthy. What brought you to this subject in the first place? Why is this person worth spending hours researching and hours more writing about? That's your beginning. You can incorporate the aspects of that person's birth, the mundane facts of when and where, later in the story, or even in the author's note. Peter put it this way, and I'm paraphrasing: we were all born somewhere and at some point in time. Begin with what makes the person you're writing about special. When writing about historical events, I tell my own students, begin with a dramatic moment, then go back and write about what brought us to that moment and what happened next. Let me give you a couple of examples from my own writing. In We Are One, the story of Bayard Rustin, a biography, I began with a morning in August 1963 when Bayard was 51 years old. He had walked out to the Washington Monument to survey the crowds he had promised the news media would congregate for the historic march in Washington. Instead of crowds of protesters, though, he was confronted by reporters who far outnumbered the protesters. One reporter asked him where everyone was. At that point, I left the scene unfinished because I wanted readers to wonder what he did. I turned then to his birth and childhood, followed his life chronologically until it brought me to the March on Washington again, and that morning in August. And here's where I finished the scene that I had used to launch the story and went on to write about the rest of Bayard's life. In shorthand, it might look like this: important. Topics have a way of speaking to you about their structure if you listen. With Accused, the trials of the Scottsboro Boys, Lies, Prejudice, and the 14th Amendment. What a title. A historical event set during the Great Depression. I began at the beginning with the arrests of 9 African-American youths who had been hoboing aboard a train. At the very end of the first chapter, I reveal why they were arrested. It's a chronological story, but one that begins at the beginning with a dramatic event, the arrests. But again, I tell just enough in those opening lines, I hope, to entice a reader into wanting to find out more. If I know anything about writing, it's that for every rule, there is an exception to the rule. This is what makes writing an art and a writer an artist. Carol Boston Weatherford begins at the beginning in her excellent biography, Gordon Parks, How the Photographer Captured Black and White America. Just listen to her opening. The youngest of 15, Parks arrives stillborn and is left for dead until a dip in ice water shocks his tiny heart to beat. The baby is named for the man who saved his life, Dr. Gordon. So while Jacoby and I might caution you to avoid beginning a biography at birth, Weatherford decided to do just that. But look at that birth. Dramatic, yes? If you liked stepping into my writing studio and want to know more about the art and craft of writing, drop me a question in the comments below and I'll attempt to answer it in an upcoming video. Also, don't forget to click on the subscribe button below this video. It will help me out greatly. Until next time, keep writing.